The security camera caught it all, but no one cared. A young black waitress holding 3 plates stacked precariously in trembling hands paused at the corner table. She bent closer, her voice barely audible over the clatter of diner cutlery, and whispered to the man seated there, "They don't want you to know the truth. But if you ignore this, it won't just cost us our jobs. It'll cost lives." This moment, grainy on camera, lasted less than 6 seconds. But those 6 seconds opened a window into a story as old as America itself. How racism hides behind respectability, behind corporate gloss, behind smiling PR campaigns, while destroying lives when nobody is watching. The question that drives everything you're about to hear is this: how do billion-dollar systems get away with crushing everyday working people, especially black workers, while pretending they stand for family values? Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you isn't just one story. It's the story. A story of power, silence, and the moment when ordinary people decide enough is enough. The woman's whispered warning in that corner booth wasn't born in isolation. It was the echo of 400 years. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time a black worker fears losing their job for speaking out, every time speaking up against discrimination feels life-threatening, we are replaying patterns stitched deep into America's foundation. Let's rewind. In the 1930s, America was climbing out of the Great Depression. Workers' rights were being redefined nationwide. The New Deal brought protections, minimum wages, collective bargaining powers. But not for everyone. Southern lawmakers refused to back it, unless black domestic workers and farm laborers were excluded. That meant more than half of black workers were left behind on purpose. Their silence was the condition for national recovery. Fast forward, redlining maps carved across American cities in the 1940s and 50s. They didn't just segregate neighborhoods, they segregated opportunity. Banks drew bold red lines on maps declaring, "If you are black and live here, you are high risk." Loans denied. Homeownership blocked. Generational wealth stolen before it could even begin. Now jump to urban job markets in the 1970s and 80s. Factories pulled out of predominantly black neighborhoods, shipping jobs overseas. But the police force expanded right where opportunity collapsed. Millions of dollars invested not in schools, not in safety nets, not in repairing structural harm, but in surveillance and punishment. When our waitress slips that note, when her voice shakes as eyes scan the room, she isn't just afraid of one corrupt manager. She is carrying the entire inheritance of systemic oppression, where the price of telling the truth has always been higher for black people. And the audience needs to feel that dread settle in. Because when people say, "Well, why didn't she just complain to HR? Why didn't she go to the police?" History already answered that question. The system was never designed to protect her. Her name is Zara, 28 years old, black, woman, mother, worker. On paper, she's a waitress scraping by at the diner. But her real resume tells the truth. Strategist, survivor, bookkeeper, caretaker, dreamer. She makes miracles out of broken paychecks and broken promises. To the outside world, she looks like just another service worker. But step inside her reality. Rent climbing faster than her wage. Shifts cut if she dares question why her check runs short. Every saved dollar stretched between food, school supplies, and an after-school babysitter so her daughter isn't left alone. And through it all, she smiles for customers. Because in the world she inhabits, dignity has to coexist with survival. Her 6-year-old daughter, Amelia, is obsessed with dinosaurs and crayons. Amelia draws pictures of a bigger house, purple walls, stars on the ceiling, and a kitchen big enough for mommy. The kind of house every child should be able to dream about without that dream feeling dangerous. Zara pretends to admire the drawing with unshaken optimism. But inside her chest, fear. Because she knows how fragile it all is. The difference between this month's rent and eviction is a single dispute with her boss, a paycheck error that won't be corrected, or a night when she refuses to stay quiet about discrimination. Silence, historically, has been survival. Speaking up could mean no job, no paycheck, no roof. Now picture this. She goes to bed at 1 a.m. after folding uniforms for tomorrow's shift. Before she turns out the light, She whispers to Amelia, kind, brave, never small. It's the mantra she wants her daughter to inherit, the opposite of what the system demands she inherit. And that is why her trembling hand, sliding a folded note under a cup of coffee, utters, it is not just a note, it is defiance, generational refusal, a stolen voice choosing to be heard no matter the cost. Culture has always been the soft whisper that makes racism sound like just reality, not the law. Not the board vote, just the vibe we're told to accept. Think about media. For decades, when black women like Zara appeared on TV, they weren't usually celebrated as the backbone of family and community. No, too often they were flattened into stereotypes. The angry black woman, the welfare queen, the sassy side character, who existed only to build someone else's story. These recycled images make it easy for bosses like Kevin to dismiss real women like Zara as replaceable. If society has already framed black workers as loud, difficult, or undeserving, then when they speak up on injustice, people shrug and say, see, that proves it. And it isn't just fictional characters. Look at headlines. When corporations crash, executives are described as miscalculated. When black workers protest, they're labeled troublemakers. Language does the dirty work of prejudice sentence by sentence, until viewers at home barely notice bias sliding under their skin. Even the very setting of Zara's struggle, the diner, comes loaded with cultural meaning. Diner booths are supposed to represent comfort, all-American hospitality, home away from home warmth. Yet for her, it's a battleground. While pop culture sells nostalgia in shiny neon lights, the people actually serving the coffee are invisible, overworked, and often black or brown. This is culture's cruel trick. It romanticizes the space but erases the people who hold it together. And behind every stereotype, every headline, every innocent omission, racism finds camouflage. Because the more a culture normalizes a false image of black workers, the easier it becomes to deny their real voices, real needs, and real humanity. That's the cultural stage our waitress is stuck performing on. A script she never auditioned for, but one she's expected to act out anyway. Here's the thing about racism. It rarely shows up wearing a white hood anymore. It wears a spreadsheet. It hides behind a policy memo. It smiles from a corporate poster that brags about diversity and inclusion, but strips dignity behind closed doors. Let's break it down. At her diner, Zara notices money missing from the tip pool, her paycheck coming up short, whispered threats floating between employees. But this isn't just bad luck from incompetent managers. It's wage theft. And here's the kicker. Research shows that wage theft disproportionately targets black workers. In fact, studies estimate nearly $50 billion a year is stolen through unpaid overtime, missing wages, and unlawful deductions. For black women, it adds up to a double tax, punished both for their gender and their race. And when Zara thinks about reporting it, she's trapped in policy purgatory. HR isn't neutral. It reports to the very managers abusing her. The system says, speak up to the people who profit when you stay silent. And when the police are brought in, trust is already shattered. For generations, black communities have learned the hard way. The law protects property and power, not always people. Zoom out further, and you see the cruel domino effect. Housing. Landlords free to hike rents with minimal protections in low-income black neighborhoods. Healthcare. Jobs like Zara's often don't provide full coverage, leaving families balancing whether to skip shifts or skip doctors. Childcare. The workforce least likely to earn a living wage is pushed hardest to pay for reliable childcare, locking them in a vicious cycle. It's a rigged equation that always sums up the same. Black labor is essential, but undervalued. Black voices are needed but silenced. Black families hold communities together, but are treated as disposable. That's why when Zara passes that note, it feels not just nervous, it feels revolutionary. Because she's defying the entire architecture of control built around her. This isn't just the story of one manager's threats. It's the story of a system designed like a maze, where every turn leads proudly to a dead end. And survival? Survival requires a new blueprint. a way to rewrite the rules the system has kept stacked for centuries. Zara's story is rooted in a Chicago diner, but echoes of her battle can be found everywhere, from Johannesburg to London, from São Paulo to Paris. Because oppression is a shapeshifter. It speaks different languages, but the accent of inequality is always recognizable. Look at South Africa. Decades after apartheid ended, black workers remain concentrated in the lowest paid jobs. Service industries, mining, domestic labor. The heavy lifting of the economy still rests on their shoulders, while white ownership dominates at the top. Different century, different continent. Same playbook, black labor fuels wealth, but black humanity is undervalued. Look at France. North African and West African immigrants, often French citizens by birth, are disproportionately stuck in unstable low-wage work. When discrimination isn't overt, it lives in the subtle things. Resumes with foreign names getting tossed. Think about that. Your very identity, your name, serving as your resume's red flag. A tiny version of redlining scribbled in ink. Look at the U.S. Latino workforce. Migrant farm workers, many undocumented, face abusive working conditions reminiscent of slavery. And while most aren't black, this is where racism intersects with xenophobia and class. The same logic applies. Exploit bodies, erase dignity, suppress voices. The labor is essential, the people dispensable. And here's the contrast that cuts deep. The further you rise up the economic ladder, the fewer black faces you see. From the diner kitchen to the corporate boardroom, representation narrows like the neck of a bottle. Opportunity trickles. And yet the risks, the stress, the microaggressions, those flood downward. But what Zara does with her trembling hand, the note under the saucer, is exactly what black workers worldwide have done for centuries. Push back, organize, resist. From sharecroppers in the Jim Crow South forming unions, to London's Windrush generation striking for equal pay, to South Africa's miners risking their lives for dignity, to today's fast food workers demanding a living wage with the rallying cry, "Fight for $15 and a union." So the contrast is clear. The systems are different. The accents are different. The uniforms are different. But the rhythm is the same. When black workers choose to resist, entire economies tremble, because they've always been the cornerstone holding them up. For weeks, Zara swallowed her fear. She endured short checks, side-eyed threats, and late-night whispers in the supply closet. She told herself, "Stay quiet, keep your head down, your daughter needs stability." Silence was survival, but silence has an expiration date. The breaking point came one night after closing. The diner's lights dimmed. The clatter of dishes fell quiet. Only a handful of employees lingered to clean up. That's when Kevin, the district manager, cornered her again. This time not with excuses about payroll or pep talks about team loyalty. This time he leaned in close and said, "Single mothers like you, they don't last long if they make noise. Shame if your little girl grew up without her mother." That was the line. The mask slipping, the corporate veneer melting into something sharp, predatory, ancient. And here's the thing. Black women have heard that line in 1,000 languages throughout history. Sometimes from landlords, sometimes from overseers, sometimes from politicians, sometimes from bosses. That line is always the same. We own your silence. We own your body. We own your future. Zara's hands shook that night as she packed her bag. But inside, the shaking was steel. Because when threats stretch to your child, survival isn't silence anymore. Survival is defiance. That defiance took the form of that folded paper under the coffee cup, the risk she slid to the stranger in a Northwestern sweatshirt. She didn't know if he'd help. She didn't even know if he'd listen. But she knew she couldn't carry the weight any longer alone. This is the turning point of every struggle against racism, the moment when fear and resignation collapse, and courage, terrifying, trembling courage, takes the wheel. But here's the twist. When marginalized voices finally dare to speak, the system always bites back harder, because power would rather destroy its own foundation than let truth ripple out. So now, the story is no longer about one diner, one paycheck, one manager. It's about survival against a machine that has already marked her silence as non-negotiable. And once the machine knows you've broken free, you're no longer just a worker, you're a threat. The note is passed. The threat has been spoken. The stakes are clear, and then, like clockwork, the voices arrive. Not Kevin's. The system's other favorite defense, the echo chamber of doubt. Maybe she's exaggerating. There's no proof. If things were really that bad, why didn't she just quit? Come on, it's 2024. Racism isn't that bad anymore. Sound familiar? Those aren't new arguments. They're the recycled excuses that have padded every injustice in American history. When people documented lynchings in the early 1900s, propaganda twisted it as isolated crimes. When black veterans came back from World War II demanding dignity, newspapers said they were ungrateful. When civil rights marchers in the 1960s were beaten on Selma Bridge, critics said they provoked it. Today, when black workers like Zara speak about bias, the bosses play the same cards: oversensitive, troublemaker. Liar, let's peel one of these lies apart. Why doesn't she just quit? The illusion here is that jobs are all equal, and opportunities sit waiting around the corner like candy stores. Reality? Black workers face higher unemployment rates even with equal qualifications. Discrimination in hiring is well documented. Just quit isn't advice, it's erasure. It's asking her to disappear rather than the injustice. Maybe it's not racism. It's just a tough boss. But then why do black women in the workplace consistently report the highest rates of harassment, microaggressions, and wage theft? Why do black mothers earn roughly 52 cents to every dollar a white man makes, even in the exact same industries? Patterns don't lie, only people do. There's no proof. That one is the system's favorite because it quietly rigs the rules of evidence. HR buries complaints. Courts dismiss cases on technicalities. Police devalue testimony from black workers. When the referee is bought, demanding proof is just demanding silence. Each doubt has one purpose: to shrink Zara until she doesn't look like a worker demanding justice. They want her to look like a problem, a complaint, a statistic to ignore. But here's the truth bomb. Every time that excuse gets recycled, it tells you less about the victim and more about the system's desperate need to protect itself. So how do you fight a system that's bigger than you? How do you push back against bosses, policies, and myths so old they feel like gravity? The answer isn't simple, but it's not impossible either, because Zara's trembling hand slipping that note is part of a long line of defiance. One moment in a chain where oppressed people refuse to play the role they were written into. Here's what the path forward looks like when fear turns into collective resistance. Union power. From the Memphis sanitation workers in 1968 to today's Starbucks and Amazon employees, black workers have known for decades the surest shield against retaliation is togetherness. One voice is easy to silence. 10 voices are harder. 100 cannot be ignored. Policy shifts, fair wage laws. Child care support, stronger anti-discrimination enforcement. Not the glossy brochures corporations hand out, but hard legislation, labor inspectors, and consequences with teeth. America loses billions each year to wage theft. Redirect that money back to workers, and you don't just balance paychecks, you balance dignity. Community networks. For every Zara standing alone, there are grassroots coalitions, churches, nonprofits, neighborhood groups, ready to catch her when the system tries to drop her. When institutions fail, communities rise. Cultural rewrites. We must retell the story of the black worker in every medium. Less stereotype, more humanity. Less erasure, more spotlight. Because when you change the picture in people's minds, you weaken the foundation of bias. And here's the sharpest edge of hope. None of this has to remain abstract. It's already happening. Campaigns for a 15 minimum wage, anti-racism workplace training designed by black women, housing cooperatives fighting gentrification, and global movements calling out racial capitalism by name. Zara's path forward is our path forward. Refuse to be silenced. Refuse to be isolated. Replace fear with solidarity, because the system counts on fear. And once fear cracks even slightly, the whole structure starts to shake. By now, you've seen the pattern. A single black waitress slipping a note under a coffee cup ends up pulling the curtain back on something far bigger than one diner, one district manager, or one paycheck, because this story was never just about Zara. It's about a world that demands silence from black workers while feeding on their labor. It's about a culture that erases dignity and then blames them for being invisible. It's about a system in which speaking truth has always carried a steeper price when the truth comes from black voices. But here's the part that cannot be ignored. Every gain we stand on today, every civil right, every workplace protection, every crumb of justice was not handed down. It was won because ordinary people like Zara defied the risk, broke the silence, and dared to demand better. And now it's our turn when we see the wage theft, the stereotypes, the excuses, the shrinking of black voices. We cannot shrug. We cannot say, that's just how it is. We cannot wait for someone richer, whiter, or more powerful to save the day, because silence keeps systems alive, but solidarity cracks them open. Zara's note was small. A torn scrap of paper. Just a few words. But it could expose corruption, protect her daughter, rewrite her workplace, maybe even ripple into changing her community. Imagine millions of those scraps of paper. Imagine every worker refusing silence, every bystander refusing complacency, and every viewer, yes you, choosing to carry this story forward. The world wants us passive. History demands we be active. So the final call is simple. Listen deeper. Speak louder. Stand closer. Because if injustice hides in silence, then justice only lives in action.